MertW was on track to being one of the best TDX YouTubers, but made the biggest mistake that might end his career. MertW, I'm the biggest hater. I hate the way that you walk. I hate the way that you talk. Bro, how does it go? I'm the biggest hater. I hate the way that you walk. I hate the way that you talk. I hate the I'm just playing. The production value on Mert's video covering his view on the future of TDX was really well made, establishing some great enlightening and insightful points. There were still some shaky arguments he made that I could easily nitpick, but I digress. Some of the things he said really stuck with me, and it got me questioning both the current and future state of TDX. It's no secret that I am quite horrible with my upload schedule and that I struggle with consistency. However, that aspect of me has seemingly gotten worse as TDX kept updating. The motivation to keep on uploading on a game that I used to love was starting to fade. TDX is simply not scratching that itch I had anymore. Now, I will admit that this might be coming from a person who is damn near level 200, and what I say might not apply to everyone, but I still think at least some of the points I want to make should be heard. Turning this video basically into all my grievances but TDX. Thank you, Morning. Well, just one grievance in particular, actually. And it has to do with the idea that TDX grew way too fast. So much so that TDX is struggling to keep up with itself. Case in point, as early as the Endless update. There was absolutely no reason that the Endless update had to be TDX's first biggest update. Well, honestly, that was probably to compensate for the warship being in the roster for TDX's first batch of towers. Well, technically not, since no one had access yet, but you get the point. But wait! Did you see what just happened there? Because of how out of place the warship was, it was essentially the catalyst for the Endless update. Almost like TDX was trying to balance the scales. And that in itself isn't wrong or anything, but it could have been avoided if the warship was never added that early in the first place. Now, hold on, I'm getting too ahead of myself. What's wrong with the Endless update? It was jam-packed with content. New bosses, new towers, and banger music. Aside from the artificial bloated wave structure to justify the terminology Endless, let me pose a question. In a tower defense game, what is more important, towers or enemies? And this isn't related to what I just said 3 seconds ago, this is just generally speaking. Most people are inclined to agree that the towers are more important since they are something people bring everywhere and essentially determine one's playstyle. However, on that same note, enemies are just as important since they reinforce that said playstyle. You can only effectively use crowd control towers on crowds of enemies. So the whole question becomes arbitrary, as both towers are equally important. Why bring it up? Let's go back to the warship. It was unanimously agreed that the warship did not fit TDX at the time, both in girth and practicality. There was absolutely no need to use warship against Petite Eradicator Mark II. It was overkill. Everyone knew warship was meant for so much more. Little did he know though he'd be getting more than he bargained for. But because warship was added in at the beginning of TDX, it caused an influx in power, completely dominating the humble Eradicator Mark II. And to counteract this, TDX decides to add in the Endless mode to justify its power level. Now, at the tip, this is all fair enough, fair play. The new strong towers are able to freely butt heads with these strong enemies, but what about everything else? By adding more demons with similar power levels to the warship, we've essentially created an entire new weight class of enemies and towers. So while the Endless update brought balance and loads of new content, it simultaneously widened the pre-existing gap TDX tried fixing in the first place. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing, since it is now clear what needs to be done to fill in the gap. Already underwhelming towers like Sniper and Patrol Boat are put on blast with this new update. Therefore, while TDX may have overstepped way too soon, there is still a chance to go back and fix what they left behind, unless they advance even further. TDX has a sort of Pokemon type gimmick where certain towers output specific damage types that enemies may be weak or strong against. Enter TDX's resistance mechanic. It started off with 5 main types with the addition of the stealth attribute. Currently, there is now a total of 8 resistances and the all-new flying attribute. Nowadays, it seems like every enemy has at least 2 resistances. But the topic of resistance's value is a conversation for another day. I am more interested in the integration of the flying attribute. As successful as the stealth was, the mere concept of flying enemies was an instant hit, essentially creating an entire new layer to TDX's gameplay. But the execution was extremely rough, to say the least. Pre-existing strong towers were given flying detection, making the flying enemies ironically feel invisible. There was no thought process behind what towers a player should pick if the towers you were already going to bring had the counter built in. As bad as that may seem, the integration of flying enemies and detection wasn't a total flop, since towers like the Golden Ranger and Railgunner were given the spotlight. It was just a tad bit hasty. Now, with all that being said, TDX has the same opportunity to go back and tweak these towers to better clash with flying enemies. There is still a chance to salvage this incredible concept and bring balance, unless they advance even further. Enter that bird that I hate. The expert rework was TDX's second shot, actually third, at rounding out the whole flying debacle. All new flying enemies and even bosses were added, alongside, dramatic pause, the AA turret, also known as the anti-air turret. Just in the name alone, you can already sense its problematic nature. But again, I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. TDX has done a tremendous job of sprinkling flying enemies throughout all of Expert, really emphasizing their presence, especially with that bird heavy on the emphasis. Jokes aside, the enemies we got were a huge step up from the flying enemy's initial debut, becoming an actual threat if not dealt with, both in regular enemies and bosses. Additionally, TDX started putting more thought into what towers should receive flying detection, like Laser Gunner and Shotgunner. Okay, well maybe not a whole lot of thought, but let me pose a question. What if, just a silly what if, there was a tower that can single-handedly wipe that issue from your brain, as if they never even existed in the first place? Well, see what I did there? There was no what if. It's just the anti-air turret. Just as I cower in fear from Artemis, I'm willing to bet every single flying enemy cowers in fear from the AA turret. There is no trade-off or downsides to this monstrosity. You place it down and you're getting what you paid for. Plain and simple. Early game, no problem. Mid game, not even a sweat. That bird that I hate, all of a sudden, I'm starting to feel sympathy. That initial idea, that potentially game-changing concept that was the flying attribute prophesized to usher in a new layer of TDX's gameplay, is completely shat on with the addition of the anti-air turret. Who thought this was a good idea? Forget about TDX growing too fast. This is TDX capping the out. I mean, there's absolutely no reason to bring anything else but the AA turret. Why waste your time trying to make Shotgunner work when you can simply place and forget? It's just ruining. You're just ruining it. You're ruining it. You look at my lips. Look at my lips. You're ruining it. Let's take a moment to pause. I'm sure at this point, with TDX's track record put on blast by yours truly, I am 95% sure you, the viewer, can understand when I say TDX has been growing a bit too fast, even recounting to where I believe it all started. But what if I were to tell you that MertW was right all along, that TDX was doomed to fail from the start. But not in the way he'd imagined. No. Before that f***ing bird that I hate. Before the endless update. And even before TDX was released. TDX was always doomed to collapse in on itself. And the person to blame is none other than John Roblox. I believe that due to the magnitude of his audience, John has this immense pressure to satisfy them at a commensurate rate. Whether that be by artificially increasing the quantity in updates like the endless mode, or prematurely releasing underdeveloped concepts such as the flying attribute. But the truth of the matter is, he wouldn't have had such a heavy burden if he simply didn't set the bar so high up. Which brings us back to the beginning. If John had simply withheld any substantial piece of content such as the worship and held his audience's expectation on a tight leash, then he would have had never felt the need to go so big in scale to match it in the first place. He would have had all the time in the world to grow and nourish his game at his own pace.
And maybe finally get out of beta.
But because he didn't, John is constantly forced to play catch up when the updates that are quite frankly way ahead of their time start to die down after their initial release. So if there is anything to take away from this video, it is that due to John setting the standard for TDX content so high up in the early stages of TDX, he has been forced to continue releasing updates at a similar or even greater magnitude to please his audience. But it doesn't have to be like that. John should recognize that he is getting way too ahead of himself and should consider the reality of his manpower, that it's okay to work with what he currently has without feeling the need to release the next big thing. Please do not release the Behemoth and Refractor yet. Me and you, John, are not ready for their arrival. Anyways, thanks for watching. It really means a lot. But until next time, Saltar.
If your girlfriend asks you to go to the movies, say, No! No movies! I'm locked in, I'm in the trenches, I'm getting rich. Stand by my side and bear the fruits of my labor! Or be gone.